It was as I returned to the main accident and emergency reception that things started to get really strange. And by really strange, I mean that the reception was completely empty. I don't care how late it gets, and at this point it was nearly 3 in the morning, the waiting room for A&E is always full, especially on a night like this. I mean, I'd been in there not 5 minutes before, and there were upwards of 30 people. But now it was utterly deserted.
Interesting.
Even the staff at the admissions desk were gone. I was freaked out.
Okay, yeah. I would be too at that point.
Checking through all of the examination rooms, the wards next.
Like, if you go from like a full hospital to no one's there, including the staff, all of a sudden, I would be a little weirded out too. Going on, everybody? John Matrix here. Hope you're all having yourselves a lovely day wherever you're at, whenever you're watching this. We're jumping into the next episode of the Magnus Archives. This is episode 12, First Aid. Links, as always, will be down below in the description to the Rusty Quill Podcasts YouTube channel, the Magnus Archives playlist, and to their website. So do me a favor, if you enjoy this episode, be sure to go over there, give it a like, check out their YouTube channel, and check out their website. If you want to find out how you can take your support for them to the next level. If you'd like to join us, there is, when I do these reactions live as I am right now with my YouTube members, there's a join button underneath the video. You can check that out. See what kind of YouTube membership stuff that I offer, if it has any kind of interest for you. But regardless, thank you guys for just taking the time out of your day to come in and hang out, watch the video. Greatly appreciating you do so. Hope you enjoy it. If you do, consider leaving a like and a sub. So all that said, we're going to jump into it here. This is episode 12 of the Magnus Archives, First Aid by the Rusty Quill Podcast. This is really quiet for some reason. So let me up. Really quiet for some reason.
Rusty Quill presents the Magnus Archives.
Should be good now, I think.
Episode 12. First
Aid.
Statement of Laziri Saraki regarding a night shift at St. Thomas Hospital, London. Original statement given February 11th, 2012. Audio recording by Jonathan Sims, Head Archivist of the Magnus Institute, London. Statement begins. I'm a nurse at St. Thomas Hospital, down in Lambeth near Waterloo Station. Technically, these days I work for Guy's and St. Thomas NHS Foundation Trust, but Guy's Hospital is at a completely different location, the other side of London, so for the sake of clarity, I work at St. Thomas. Christmas is one of the worst periods to be working at a hospital, and in the accident and emergency department it's even more unpleasant.
I could see that, right? Holidays in general are probably busy for hospitals. People are drunk and stupid and they're out celebrating and accidents happen.
Pensioners who can't afford to properly heat their homes, drunken partygoers who overindulge and hurt themselves, even just people who didn't look where they were going and slipped on a patch of ice. Christmas brings out the side of people that always seems to lead them to the hospital. So I was relieved last year when I got my shift pattern and learned that my last A&E shift of the season was going to be on the 23rd, 2 full days before Christmas itself. That was the good news. The bad news was that the 23rd was also the Friday immediately before the big day. And that meant people finishing work for the holidays and
getting out early.
out for some celebration.
Yep.
When you work in accident and emergency, there are few words that fill your heart with such dread as the word celebration. That night wasn't as bad as some I'd seen. A few broken bones and a couple of drug-fueled injuries, but no fights or angry drunks, which was a blessing. It must have been about 1:30 in the morning that the ambulance arrived. They had radioed ahead, and we knew that we had a pair of severe burn victims being brought in, so we were as ready as we could have been. I was heading out to meet the ambulance when I noticed that the A&E waiting room was totally silent. I looked around, and there were all the people there that I expected to see, some cradling obvious injuries, but none of them made a sound. They continued to stare at their phone, read books, comfort one another, but not one of them spoke. I didn't have much time to really consider what I was seeing, as at that moment I heard the ambulance pull up outside and ran off to see to the first patient. By the time I arrived, they were already wheeling him out, and the doctor was assessing his burns. The doctor's name was Kaylee Grice, and she was a junior doctor at St. Thomas. She started giving some instructions to myself and the EMTs, but I was struck by how quietly she was speaking to me. She didn't whisper, but every word was very soft, as though it was a real effort to get them out.
Interesting.
Nobody else seemed to notice, so at the time I assumed the effect was due to my own lack of sleep. I've always had difficulty adjusting to the late nights, and this time had been particularly bad. We finished transferring him to a treatment room, the only available one we had that night, and the doctor and EMTs returned to get the other patient while I began dealing with the burns on the first. I'm 48 years old, and I have been a nurse for most of that, so I've seen a good number of burns in my time. I was prepared for some deeply unpleasant scenes when the call came in, as bad burns can be some of the nastiest injuries you see working in a hospital. These ones surprised me. They were second degree, which is severe, but not usually such as to require hospitalization, except that they appeared to cover his entire body. Every inch of exposed skin showed signs of this burning, and cutting away his clothes, it became apparent that the damage had spread there as well. Anything hot enough to cause this sort of effect should have damaged his clothing or even melted them onto the skin in places. But they were utterly unharmed, as though he had been dressed after he'd been burned, or the heat had passed right through his clothes without touching them. He was a tall man, heavy set, with
or if it's some kind of radiation burn, but I would think that would still have an effect on the clothes, right?
The sort of build I associate with an athletic middle age. Any hair he might have had was gone, apparently burned off, and his clothes were a nondescript black suit and white shirt. He didn't scream or cry or moan in pain. And in fact, the doctor had had to check his pulse when he'd come in to confirm he was still alive.
Weird. So he's got second-degree burns over his whole body. His hair's been burned off, but his clothes aren't affected, and he's not making any kind of noise that he's in pain, right? That's very strange. Because, like, burns suck.
He was. But as far as I could tell, he appeared to be sleeping peacefully.
Like, the doctor had to check his pulse, and he's sleeping peacefully in that state. That's, yeah, that would be some kind of strange anomaly, right? That would have to be studied, because you would think would his nervous system be like functioning properly then? You know what I'm saying? Like, as a doctor or a nurse, you would have to be questioning, right? Or is he like on something?
I had just started treatment when the second patient was wheeled in. He was in almost identical shape to the first, except for the fact that the burns seemed to stop at his neck, along a clear line. It was as though he'd been wearing a choker that the heat couldn't get above, but his neck was bare. He was smaller than the first man, and younger, I'd guess in his mid-30s. He was clean-shaven, but had long hair dyed completely black. He wore a similar suit to the older man, except that over the top he wore a long black leather coat, just as undamaged as the rest. It looked new, and I felt quite bad having to cut it off him, but we had to confirm how extensive his injuries were. Like the first, he was completely covered in almost uniform second-degree burns, except for what at first I thought were small black scorch marks. Looking closer, I saw that they were eyes.
What?
Small, tattooed eyes on every
Oh.
one of his joints.
Tattooed eyes is different from like literally they're just being eyes all over your body. Like what?
His knees, his elbows, and even his knuckles.
So it sounds like these guys might have been a part of some kind of ritual or something.
As well as just over his heart. I would have expected the burns to have almost destroyed tattoos that small, but instead they were unblemished, and the skin about a centimetre around each one also didn't seem to have been affected. To say I was unsettled by this would have been something of an understatement. I barely noticed when Dr. Grice and the EMTs returned. They seemed to be talking normally now, discussing who these two people were. Apparently the fire brigade had responded to reports of a blaze in a building site near St. Mary's churchyard and had turned up to find the two men lying unconscious.
So, okay. So the doctor was whispering, or at least seemed to have been whispering. So, like, what does that mean? Or was struggling to getting out any words, and you know, the main character here could only perceive them as whispers. And now there was a fire at a church, or at least there was a reported fire at the church. The EMTs and the fire department got there, and they found these two dudes. So something definitely went on.
There had been no fire, although the
With no
ground
fire.
they lay on showed several burn marks and a metal.
Is this another, like, is this some kind of spontaneous combustion thing? There was a previous episode where it sounded like something similar. The guy who was like hired to go work on the house or whatever and saw the owner come in, that turned out to be a spirit, and then like disappeared with scorch marks around. Sounds kind of similar.
Bar that had been lying nearby appeared to have bent slightly, as if from great heat. The fire service had called out an ambulance, and they had brought the men here. Apparently the older one hadn't had anything on him at all. No ID, no phone, no keys, nothing.
That's weird.
While the younger man had only a Zippo lighter with an eye design on it, similar to the one tattooed all over him.
What is with this guy in
An
eyes?
old passport that identified him as Jared Key.
Jared Key. That name sounds familiar. At least the key part does.
I never got a look at the passport, but from the way the EMTs were talking about it, I gathered the man was well travelled. It was at this point that the EMTs had to head out on another call, and Dr. Grice and I got down to treating the two men, the weirdness temporarily forgotten. Medically speaking, there was nothing abnormal about the burns, and it didn't take as long as I had feared to get them properly cleaned and bandaged.
Yeah.
Throughout it all, the two of them didn't stir, and I wondered if they were comatose, but that sort of diagnosis would require a lot more testing, which probably wasn't going to happen that night. So, having finished giving them what treatment we could, the men were moved to one of the few wards with bed space, and I returned to working A&E. And, for an hour or so, I forgot about the odd strangers that lay unconscious just a few doors away.
And there's definitely something strange going on, right? Like the reports of a church that was set on fire, but it's not on fire. But there's burn victims, but they're not suffering. As far as they know, they're not drugged in any way. The burn marks are just affecting the skin itself and not any kind of clothing. You got a guy with eye tattoos all over his body, and he also has a Zippo lighter with an an eye pattern on it. Like, what is happening? Is this some kind of Illuminati stuff going on here? Like, what is this?
I only noticed them again when I had to pass through that ward heading towards the nearby stockroom for some more gauze. As I walked through, I became aware of a sound coming from the bed of the older burn victim. I never did find out his name. I walked towards him slowly, straining my ears to hear what he was saying. It was so quiet as to be almost inaudible.
So is there something that is going on with him where it's like making the vocal, like spoken word, less audible? because he said, you know, he could only perceive the doctor giving orders like as a whisper. And now he can barely perceive what this guy's saying. I mean, granted, you know, he's been burned, so who knows? But that's strange.
Definitely words. The same words over and over. The more I heard, the more it sounded like most of them weren't in English. The first sounded like a sark or a sarg, then vipalach, and finally in English, the lightless flame. The last part was very clear.
The
I assumed he
lightless
was talking
flame.
about whatever burned him, but he said it with such intensity that the words made me feel quite uncomfortable. His eyes were still closed and his lips were barely moving. I started to feel warm, like there was a fever quickly creeping out towards my skin.
Yikes.
It wasn't the first time I'd had a reaction like this, though, so I took a moment to center myself, and the feeling receded.
It definitely sounds like he was reciting something, right? Yeah, or praying to something, maybe. Right? Like he's saying something in a language he doesn't understand, but then the last few words are English. And what did he say? Like the lightless flame? What was it that he said?
Fever quickly creeped. The last part was very clear, and I assumed he was talking about whatever burned him, but he said it with such intensity that the words made me feel quite uncomfortable. His eyes were still closed and his lips were barely moving. I started to feel warm. It sounded like a sark or a sarg, then vipalach, and finally in English, the lightless flame.
Yeah, the lightless flame. I don't know what the first two, I don't know if the first two words are, like, I don't know if that's some kind of Latin. I have no idea what language that could potentially be. Sog or sock and something palach. I have no idea what that could be. And then he says in English, the lightless flame. I don't know. That definitely sounds, yeah, definitely sounds like he's either reciting something or praying something, or he's saying what happened to him, maybe. I don't know.
Feel quite uncomfortable. Started to feel warm, like there was a fever quickly creeping out.
Yeah, it doesn't
towards my
sound
skin.
Latin, but I don't know.
It wasn't the first time I'd had a reaction like this, though, so I took a moment to center myself, and the feeling receded. The burned man was still whispering. I might even have called it chanting, and I wasn't entirely sure what to do, so I checked his bandages to make sure that they didn't need changing, and left to go and continue
For
my
real.
shift. If I saw Dr. Grice, which was more than likely, then I could tell her that our mystery burn victim had started talking. Mostly I just wanted to get out of that room for as long as possible. It was as I returned to the main accident and emergency reception that things started to get really strange. And by really strange, I mean that the reception was completely empty. I don't care how late it gets, and at this point it was nearly 3 in the morning. The waiting room for A&E is always full, especially on a night like this. I mean, I'd been in there not 5 minutes before, and there were upwards of 30 people. But now it was utterly deserted.
Interesting.
Even the staff at the admissions desk were gone. I was freaked out. quite
Okay,
frankly.
yeah. I would be too at that point.
Checking through all of the examination rooms, the wards next.
Like if you go from like a full hospital to no one's there, including the staff, all of a sudden, I would be a little weirded out too.
Door, the individual patient rooms. All empty, except for those patients physically too sick to move or hooked up to IVs. They lay there sleeping, and part of me wanted to wake them just to hear the sound of another human being, to not be alone. But like
Or yeah, I mean, I would check to make sure they're still alive or something, dude, right? Like what's happening? Like have we just been transported into some kind of alternate dimension, or did the people that were around transport it? Like I don't know. I mean, I'm saying this as an outside viewer, understanding that this is some kind of like supernatural story, but IRL, I would still be weirded out and be like, something strange is happening here. The staff is gone. The wing has been cleared out. Like, are these two guys like some kind of like, is it like potentially they're some kind of biowarfare victims or something, and people forgot to let me know. And like I've been quarantined and no one told me. Like what's happening, right? Like
I say it was 3 in the morning, and weird as all this was, I couldn't justify waking up patients just to put my own mind at ease. I went as far as to make as much noise as possible directly outside their rooms, but they just slept on. It was as I returned to the waiting room for the 3rd time in as many minutes that I heard it. It sounded like the growl of an animal, a rolling, angry sound, and I realized that the floor was shaking ever
I've
so
heard this
slightly.
before.
I looked around for the source of the noise. I was getting more and more frantic by the second, and then I saw it.
We heard something similar, right? Like the story of the kid and the father was going around killing people and did that ritual at the end with all the hearts, right? There was this like black entity coming down the street following him, and he heard this growl, etc. So is this something similar, or is this same entity or something a similar one?
I was getting more and more frantic by the second, and then I saw it. Lined up against the wall of the waiting room were 2 vending machines.
Good.
I rarely paid them any attention, as there were better options in the staff room, and one or both of them were usually out of order. But I now saw that the one on the left, a clear-fronted machine that stocked bottled soft drinks, was shaking violently. As I got nearer, I saw why. In every bottle, in every row of the machine, the drinks appeared to be violently boiling.
What?
Cokes and lemonades and fruit juices shook and bubbled before one by one the bottles exploded, coating the inside of the clear plastic front with liquid that still kept steaming and hissing.
I would be booking it the F out of there, brother. I don't care what's going on at this point. I'd be like, yo, I'm out of here. There is sodas in a vending machine that are boiling over to the point that the cans are exploding. Some kind of craziness is happening. I'm out. You guys can handle this.
It couldn't have taken more than 30 seconds for all of them to pop.
For real.
And then the waiting room was silent once again.
We need to get some MTFs out here to take care of this.
At this point, I was just about ready to abandon my shift and leave the hospital. Whatever was going on there, I wanted no part of it.
Yeah.
I ran towards the door leading from the A&E to the chill of the December night, not something I would ever have thought I'd look forward to. As I approached, though, I noticed that the plastic at each end of the metal handles was ever so slightly warped. I tentatively touched the back of my hand to them and withdrew it almost immediately.
What is happening?
I didn't even have to touch it to feel the intense heat radiating from the door.
So, like, is this guy who's up there chanting, is he like casting some kind of crazy like ritual burning spell or something? But why is it only affecting like certain things, right? Like it's affecting this vending machine with soda in it. It's affecting like these weird kind of plastic hand railings or whatever she was just touching, right? But it's not like affecting them. But then where did all the other people go? Did they like vaporize and disappear? She didn't mention any kind of scorch marks anywhere. Like what is going on?
I almost wept. If I was getting out of there, it wasn't going to be through that door. I
Break a window or something, brother.
Wards, heading towards another exit, but as I passed through, I could hear the burned man still mumbling to himself, louder now, so that his weird chant was audible even outside of his room, and it was starting to get to me.
Tape that man's mouth shut.
I went in.
I don't know.
I don't know what I was planning to do. I just needed to make him shut up somehow.
Yeah.
His eyes were open now, bloodshot behind the bandages and staring blankly towards the ceiling. At that moment, I decided that I was going to shut him up, even if I had to physically hold his mouth closed. I approached him slowly and reached towards his face. A second before I could touch him, a hand shot out and grabbed me by the wrist. I turned to see the other burn victim, whose passport had identified him as Jared Key, on his feet and shaking his head. His grip on my wrist was far stronger than I would ever have expected from someone that injured. I could feel a heat through his bandaged hand, like his skin was still burning somehow. I screamed. Why not? I'd already established no one was around to hear me. He immediately released my hand and apologized, said he'd only been trying to protect me. I asked him from what, and he gestured to the burned man, still lying motionless in his bed, chanting his nonsense phrases. Sparing a glance at his own wrapped form, he said that touching the man would have been a bad idea. He seemed to be in tremendous pain as he spoke, but did his best to hide it.
So it sounds like the other guy tried to do the same thing, and that's how he got burned. Okay.
I didn't say anything then. I wanted to ask what was happening, and it seemed like he was waiting for me to do just that. But something stopped me. Something told me that if there was a coherent explanation for everything that had happened since the ambulance arrived, then I would be no better off for knowing it. After a few seconds of awkward silence, Jared spoke. He asked me if the paramedics had brought any items in with them. Specifically, he was after a small book, bound in red leather.
Yo, is this guy like performing an exorcism? Is this the name of the... Not the same name as the priest that like cleared the house, right? With the tree that he pulled over, etc. It's not the same name. Name does sound familiar. Jonathan Key, right? I think it's it, right? But like, was he performing some kind of exorcism and got like burned in the middle of this?
And a brass pendant he had been wearing. He didn't say what design had been on the pendant, but I guessed it had been an eye.
An eye.
I told him that neither of those things had been brought in with him, and he was quiet for a long time. After the last 10 minutes spent desperately wishing for another human being to talk to, I should have been relieved with Jared's company. But watching him, standing and walking despite the burns covering 80%...
Well, he was looking for a book with like a red binding, and then I think a brass eye pendant is what he was looking for.
...of his body, despite the sheer quantity of painkillers we had given him. He just made me very afraid.
Which, isn't that the same pendant that the mom was wearing in the episode where she disappeared? And all those people from that church? Like, didn't Dad hunt down and kill all the people from that church that wore a pendant with an eye on it?
Finally he nodded, as though dismissing me, and limped past into the corridor, towards the supply cupboard. I followed him, asked what he was doing. I got no answer, but he seemed to know the code to the door immediately, and strode right in, scanning the shelves for something. He saw what he was after and picked up a small object wrapped in paper and plastic. I recognized it immediately as a sterile scalpel. He was going to kill the chanting man. I could feel it in the way he stared past me as I...
And then again, at the end of the episode, Dad was doing some kind of ritual chant before he stabbed a heart, and all those hearts were beating in unison. There's definitely some correlation going on here.
I stood in the doorway. He started walking towards me. The storage room was not big, and it took him barely a second before he was in front of me, but it was the longest second I've ever experienced, as I tried to decide whether to risk my own life for that of the burned stranger, blankly chanting his unsettling prayer. Behind Jared, I saw bottles of saline solution start to bubble and boil. I stepped aside. He nodded in appreciation, and said something that I remember very clearly, even though it still makes no sense. He said, "Yes, for you, better beholding than the lightless flame." I didn't try to stop him as he walked back.
Wait, what did he say? Better for you, better beholding than the lightless flame? Is that what he said?
And said something that I remember very clearly, even though it still makes no sense. He said, "Yes, for you, better beholding than than the Lightless Flame.
Yeah, better
I
beholding than
didn't
the
try
Lightless
to stop
Flame.
him as he walked back into the ward. I just stood there and watched as he took out the scalpel, muttered some words I couldn't make out, and plunged the blade into the center of the chanting man's throat.
And, oh, okay. I
At
thought he
that
was going to go
moment,
for the
there was
heart.
the sound of sizzling and a smell like rotten meat on a grill. I watched as the flesh around that wound began to blacken and crack.
Wasn't that also something that was noted? The kid, when the garage was open and found dad in there doing the ritual, wasn't there a mention of like the smell of burnt flesh?
Bandages curled and disintegrated, and the scorched skin spread over his body like water.
Jesus.
There was no fire, and I felt no heat. But over the course of 20 seconds, I watched this man's body cremate itself to ash. Even the scalpel was gone. Jared Key walked over to his own bed, and picking up the empty bedpan beneath it, gently swept the ashes into the basin and handed it to me, asking me to dispose of it. I took it and numbly walked out, heading towards a medical waste bin. As I walked the corridor, I noticed a figure at the other end. It was Dr. Grice. I'm not ashamed to admit that I wept in relief as I ran to the waiting room and saw it once again full of people complaining and moaning to themselves.
Weird.
By the time I was finished and got back to the room, Jared was lying in his own bed, apparently sleeping. I considered asking him now what had happened, but at that moment another ambulance arrived with 3 members of a Christmas party that had gotten dangerously out of hand. And just like that, the rest of my shift was gone. Jared Key was treated for a further 4 days in the hospital before being discharged into the care of his mother. I tried to talk to him about what happened, but he was on a lot of painkillers and never seemed to really register I was there. It may have been feigned, I suppose. But in the end, the result was the same. Since then, I've just tried not to think about it. I'd managed to get almost 30 years of nursing under my belt before something like this happened, so with any luck, I'll be long retired by the time anything like it happens again.
Yeah, you would hope so.
I worry sometimes, though. Over the last few months, when I'm alone on the wards, I get the feeling I'm being watched. Not threatened or judged, just watched. I avoid that storeroom, particularly. Statement ends. There's obviously a lot to unpack here, so let's start with what is provable. Sasha managed to get access to the hospital records for this period, and they do list the admission of Jared Key and an unknown male for burn injuries similar to what Ms. Saraki described. Furthermore, there are only discharge papers for Jared Key, and a short police report on the disappearance of the second burn victim. No evidence of foul play was found, and no official missing persons case was ever opened. As far as the mystery man's chanting goes, if it was indeed a sarg that he was saying, then that's quite interesting. A sarg is the name of a demon in Sumerian mythology associated with disease and corruption.
Oh, we got some Nurgle shit.
Doesn't really seem to have much relevance to this statement, except that it was also fabled that a sarg was able to boil fish alive in their rivers. Admittedly, in Sumerian myth, this was because he was monstrously ugly, but a curious coincidence nonetheless. The palach might also be a mishearing of the Polish word vypalach, according to Martin, which means to cauterize or brand. Admittedly, if Martin speaks Polish in the same way he speaks Latin, then he might...
So to cauterize the Lightless Flame, I think is what he would be saying, right?
I'd be talking nonsense again, but I've looked it up and it appears to check out. I can't find anything conclusive on the...
So it seems, I don't know if this was the same guy was the priest, right? But it does seem like the first guy might have been possessed by a demon and was chanting these things. Maybe it was a situation where he purposely took the demon into himself again to cauterize the Lightless Flame, right? Maybe they're trying to contain it and like banish it back to hell or whatever. Maybe the first guy actually took the demon in himself, and the second guy was trying to perform an exorcism or banishment or something like that. Maybe that's what was going on. But it definitely seems like Jared Key, the guy with all the eye tattoos and the eye pendant, is part of the same group that was from the father's love tale, story or whatever, with the eye pendant. I need to go back and rewatch that episode now and see if that is the case. Anyway, let's continue with the summary here.
The phrase "the lightless flame," however, it crops up in a lot of different contexts throughout various esoteric literatures. It has not escaped my notice that this is the second time Jared Key has turned up in this archive.
Yep.
I'd be very keen to get his statement, but unfortunately it looks like he passed away from a brain tumor late last year.
Well,
we're doing further research into him, though.
Or is he faking his death?
If we're lucky, maybe we already have a statement from him tucked away somewhere in these damn files. We contacted Miss Saraki to see if she wanted to make a follow-up statement, but she declined. Apparently she still gets the watched feeling occasionally, but aside from that, there haven't been any other abnormal occurrences in her professional or personal life. One final note. Sasha has been able to access the hospital's CCTV footage for the night of 23rd December 2011.
Oh.
And it shows something quite startling. I had assumed that there was a significant hallucinatory element to Ms. Saraki's story, and indeed the ward where Jared Key was admitted didn't have a camera. But the accident and emergency waiting room did. At 03:11:22, it shows everybody in that room, which I personally counted at 28 people, standing up and calmly filing out of the doors.
What?
After this, Ms. Saraki can be seen entering and leaving 3 times, once taking a minute to stare at something beneath the camera, which I assume to be the vending machine. The rest of the staff and patients do not return until 03:27:12, over 15 minutes after they left, when they walk back in through the same doors.
Interesting.
The footage does not contain any sound, and no alarm of any sort was recorded, so I cannot offer any guess as to why they left or what they were doing in the intervening time.
Yeah, interesting.
There is one other thing Sasha highlighted, however. At 03:22:52, the feed cuts out for less than a second and is replaced for a single frame by a close-up of a human eye staring back through the video feed.
Yikes, brother.
Recording ends.
Yikes, brother. Okay. This was a good one. This is a really good one.
Magnus Archives is a podcast distributed by rustyquill.com and licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share-alike International License. Today's episode was written and performed by Jonathan Sims. It was produced by Alexander J. Newell, Mike LeBeau, and Murray Porter, and directed by Alexander J. Newell. To comment on episodes, make donations, and view links, images,
For real,
videos,
dude.
and show notes,
Every
visit
episode keeps getting better.
rustyquill.com. Rate and review us on iTunes, visit us on Facebook, tweet us on Twitter at The Rusty Quill, or email us at mail@rustyquill.com. Thanks for listening.
All right, you heard the man. You heard all the ways you can contact them, etc. Twitter, email them, check out their website. Links will be down below to all that stuff, to their website, the Magnus Archives playlist, and to the Rusty Quill Podcast YouTube channel. If you are new and are enjoying this series so far, please be sure to go over and give this video a like, hit that sub button on their channel, and check out their website for any kind of ways that you can take your support for them to the next level if you would like to do so. Great episode. I already kind of gave my thoughts as we went through. I need to go back and watch a Father's Love episode again, because it definitely seems like there's ties in with that. The eye pendant, I believe, is the same pendant that the mother was wearing before she disappeared, that was left on the table when the door was just left open. And the dad you know, was performing some kind of ritual chant as well, with all those heartbeats beating in unison before he stabbed it, and that being went away, entity went away, whatever. There was also, I believe, like a reference to burnt hair or burnt flesh or smell of something burning, you know, as the kid opened the shed when the dad was in there doing the ritual. And I think that's then where the name Jared Key came from as well. So I think this is kind of pushing along that kind of story, but very interesting, very interesting. I'm curious, I guess, to know what your guys' thoughts are in the comments. But it seems like potentially that these two found a demon and were trying to banish it, and the first person potentially took the demon into itself and was reciting a chant to keep it contained long enough for Jared Key to banish it or kill it, whatever, through whatever ritual process they had been going through. That seems to me what happened. Or, you know, the guy himself was a demon. I don't know, right? It seems like strange that if the unknown guy was the actual demon, why it would allow itself to be captured or injured, or I don't know. It just seems like it would be strange for him, the demon itself. The other strange thing that is kind of unexplained is, why everyone left. Why did everyone just seemingly, like, it seemed like maybe it was part of the ritual that the guy was doing, the chant. Maybe he, you know, through whatever he was chanting, it got them to leave. Also, like, why were there times when audio stuff was quiet and not necessarily able to be heard at times? You know, that's also something that's interesting that I'm curious to know more about, if it has any meaning or not. It would seem to be this kind of show or series, all those little details seem like they have some kind of meaning. But also why she was the only one not really affected by that, right? Like, she was there in that ward when everyone else was in there, I believe. And then, you know, she was, maybe it's because she was in the same room with them. And then when she left to go check on, you know, the waiting room or whatever, everyone in there was gone. Maybe her, like, proximity to it was, or the fact that she actually physically heard it, maybe that's what, and that she was aware of it, like, prevented the hypnosis or the spell from taking effect or whatever. But very interesting. This was a very interesting episode. And it seems like we might be getting into some other references that might be brought up again in the future, you know, with the demon's name, Asog, I think, and the Lightless Flame and things like that. So very interesting episode. Really enjoyed this one. So looking forward to seeing where this series goes. I mean, like I said, every episode keeps getting more and more interesting, and I keep you know, keeps me wanting to dive deeper into the Magnus Archives. So thank you guys for watching. Hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, consider leaving a like and a sub, as it helps me and the channel grow. There is a playlist for other reactions to the Magnus Archive if you want to check that out. I also do reactions to the SCP universe. I have lots of reactions to those videos, as well as Warhammer 40k and Warhammer Fantasy. So if any of that stuff would interest you, there's playlists for that on the channel. You can check all that stuff out. But yeah, if you enjoyed this video of mine, consider leaving a like and a sub, as it helps me and the channel grow. If you'd like to take your support to the next level, there is a join button underneath the video. You can check out the YouTube membership benefits and tiers that I offer to see if any of that would have any interest for you. But thank you guys for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. Hope you're having yourselves a wonderful day. We'll see you guys on the next one.